It's a great honor for me to be here at the Empire Club of Canada today, which is arguably the most famous and historically relevant speakers podium to have ever existed in Canada. It has offered its podium to such international luminaries as Winston Churchill, Ronald Reagan, Audrey Hepburn, the Dalai Lama, Indira Gandhi, and closer to home, from Pierre Trudeau to Justin Trudeau. Literally generations of our great nation's leaders, alongside with those of the world's top international diplomats, heads of state, and business and thought leaders.
It is a real honor and a distinct privilege to be invited to speak to the Empire Club of Canada, which has been welcoming international diplomats, leaders in business and in science and in politics. And when they stand at that podium, they speak not only to the entire country, but they can speak to the entire world.
Good afternoon, fellow directors, past presidents, members, and guests. Welcome to the 116th season of the Empire Club of Canada. I'm Mike Van Solen. I'm the president of the Empire Club, and I am delighted to be your host today for a virtual event, the evolution of an economic engine assessing the state of Canadian advanced manufacturing. I now call this meeting to order. We couldn't do these events without our generous sponsors, so I'd like to thank our presenting partner and lead event sponsor, Business Development of Canada, better known to many of us as BDC. I'd also like to thank our event partner, VVC and livemeeting.ca, Canada's online event space, for webcasting today's event. And I would like to thank our media partner, the National Post. Back in 2008, just as the Great Recession was starting, the Empire Club hosted an event called Is There a Future for Manufacturing in Canada? Well, many, including our panelists today, likely never doubted the answer. The COVID-19 pandemic seems to have made it crystal clear for everyone. Yes, yes, there is. As critical international supply chains broke down over the past months, there was a time when it seemed that every country was on its own. Everyone was for themselves when it came to procuring essential health and safety products. In that moment, it was clear just how critical it was to have a strong and capable manufacturing sector right here in Canada. We saw the automotive sector turn on a dime, from making engines to making ventilators. Other manufacturers and other sectors pivoted to making test kits, gloves, masks, and gowns. The list goes on. There is just as much uncertainty today as there is about the future as there was back in 2008. But a lot has changed. For one thing, we're meeting over Zoom and not at the Royal York in downtown Toronto. But as we move into the second half of the year, as the economy begins to recover, we might see a very different manufacturing sector emerge out of this crisis. Here to tell us what that might look like is an all-star panel. Jason Myers is the CEO of NGen, or Next Generation Manufacturing Canada, the industry-led nonprofit leading Canada's advanced manufacturing supercluster. Jason and NGen have been absolutely central to the retooling effort during COVID-19, and it's terrific that he's able to join us today. Diane Rico is the president and CEO of Rico International Group. She and her family have been running one of the province's most innovative manufacturing companies down on the lakeshore for more than 40 years. There is probably nobody better positioned to tell us about the realities on the ground today. And rounding out the panel is Flavio Volpe, the president of the Automotive Parts Manufacturers Association. It was Flavio who helped bring everyone to the table to start making critical equipment like ventilators and respirators right here in Ontario. He was rightfully dubbed a manufacturing hero by the Toronto Star, and he is here with us today as well. And our panel will be moderated by Peter Hadges, partner, national sector leader, automotive, KPMG in Canada, and managing director, KPMG Corporate Finance. Before I turn things over to Peter, please know that this is an interactive event. Feel free to submit your questions in the dialogue box below the picture, and we'll do our best to incorporate some of those into the discussion today. So without further ado, let me turn it over to Peter.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I'm your moderator, Peter Hatches, and I'm joined by, I think, an excellent panel. And I think today's discussion is going to be very informative and revealing for all of us. It's certainly been one of the most unique periods in modern history, with a shutdown of the global economy as we battle the COVID-19 pandemic. I can't emphasize enough how important manufacturing is to the Canadian economy, the global economy, and how the pandemic has put a spotlight on the ability of nations to respond to the emergency needs of its population. Manufacturing is very important to Canada and Canadian GDP. It's the second most impactful sector and accounts for 10% of GDP. When you add warehousing and transportation, which is highly connected, it accounts for 15% of GDP, and that is by far and away the largest sector. So a number of spin-off benefits, as many of you know. Monthly manufacturing shipments, as an example, in Canada amount to approximately $50 billion. The sector employs 1.7 million people. As the Internet of Things takes hold and advanced manufacturing opens a new opportunity for a variety of Western economies to rekindle their manufacturing footprint and supply, it becomes critical, and these manufacturing efficiencies will help us reduce labor costs and reestablish manufacturing in Western economies. So with that, let's talk to our panel. And I have a series of questions. And as we go, hopefully we'll address some of the questions that might come from the audience. So I'll kick it off with Jason. And Jason, first question to you. There's a lot of buzz around advanced manufacturing. Do you equate this to manufacturing 4.0 that people refer to, and how would you describe it for our listeners? And how important is it to Canadian business?
Well, thanks a lot, Peter. It's great to be here. As Mike mentioned, back in October 2008, there was a similar presentation to the Empire Club. In fact, I was speaking at that time talking about the future of advanced manufacturing in Canada. So a lot of common themes here. And as Mike has said, I think it maybe has taken the pandemic to show Canadians the real importance of manufacturing and being able to not only bring new production into the business, but frankly to save lives. This has been a tremendous effort by manufacturers across Canada. What does advanced manufacturing mean? Well, clearly there's a lot of discussion today about Industry 4.0, manufacturing 4.0, the fourth industrial revolution, the impact that digital technologies have had on production systems, on the capability of companies. But when we're talking about world-leading advanced manufacturing capabilities, it's not just technology. What we're looking at is, and what I think the way we have to look at advanced manufacturing in Canada is the ability of manufacturers to achieve superior results, superior business results, to be able to compete and to grow in a very, very competitive global environment. Technology plays a part of that, but far beyond that, it's questions of leadership, the ability to bring to customers new value-adding solutions through a product. Manufacturers make things. It's being able to motivate people, have people work together with capabilities that are unique for businesses. It's the ability to put in place processes that are world-leading and to continue to improve those processes. And it's the ability to use the technologies, the tools, the digital technologies that are now really changing the nature, not only disrupting markets, but changing the nature of the business of manufacturing itself. So coming back to your question about how does this impact the importance of manufacturing in Canada, I'd say a couple of things. We often are fixated by technology, and we don't look at the business itself, how good manufacturers are in Canada, how well they are able to pivot. And some of that is part of it, the capability delivered by technology. But it may surprise everyone to know that if you compare the profitability of Canadian manufacturers and U.S. manufacturers, Canadian companies are more profitable than their U.S. counterparts. They're smaller, they're much more agile, They focus on solutions. The other thing that I think is very important is the nature of manufacturing itself. I describe manufacturing as an anchor of value creation in the economy. It's transportation, warehousing, but it's also the engineering and the technology and the software and the logistics and all of the services that count on manufacturing as major customer. And so when you look at that broader value network, the importance of manufacturing to this country, I think becomes even more important than when you look at the direct contribution to GDP. So, in short, it's a hugely important sector. It's even more important today, but I'm totally optimistic that it will continue to compete, continue to grow, continue to flourish here in Canada, and it won't be just as a result of the use of technology. It'll be because of the leadership and the management capabilities of every manufacturer in the country.
Yeah, well, that's insightful because, and I agree with your comments, I think manufacturing capability in Canada is underestimated and understated. And I think you're right, as evidence would have it. I think there are a lot of profitable Canadian manufacturers who've done it right, and despite all the issues they might face with respect to trade and manufacturing advantage, they seem to get the job done. So I agree wholeheartedly. Let's turn it over to Diane. And Diane, your business has evolved over the years. You're certainly more than a tool and mold maker from how you started. How does advanced manufacturing affect you? And do you think you're vulnerable because of it, or is this an opportunity for you?
Hi. Thanks, Peter. And thanks to the Empire Club and BDC for sponsoring this event. It's great to be here. Yeah, we really have sort of incorporated, I guess, advanced manufacturing throughout all of our history. Yes, we did start as a tool and mold maker back in 1976. It's a lot younger than I am today. And things were quite manual back in those days. So as computerization and CAD/CAM became available, we were one of the first to embrace the new technology and incorporate it into our processes. Obviously, allowed us to keep competitive and continue to build those tools for those parts like we do today. With a few of them sitting behind me here. As time went on, we developed a machine building division, which grew into our automation division, recognizing that within our own facilities, we needed to use technology, but also that there was a demand for it out in the world. You just couldn't be globally competitive, and we're predominantly exporters. You couldn't be globally competitive without using those technologies and some of those advanced capabilities. We then had an acquisition of a large machine tool parts manufacturing company, Concord, which has been part of RICO for a long time now, where we're machining very precision, very, very large cast and fabricated parts. We used, again, advanced manufacturing, some of it from within our own division, to create some tipping tables to allow us to machine, at one point in time, if you can believe it, 22 locomotive crankcases in a week. So it was pretty big volume. So you have to use some of that advanced manufacturing combined with that sort of tribal, traditional machine manufacturing knowledge to be able to achieve great things. There's robotic tool changers and all kinds of things as well in that division. So I think in general, it's not a threat if you explore it and figure out how to incorporate it into what you're doing. Because at the end of the day, if you want to stay globally competitive, you've got to use those tools.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting that you say that, Diana. I mean, I think you would say you are globally competitive, wouldn't you, to compete in this industry with?
I would say yes, although, I'm not sure the playing field is always quite fair when I hear some of the pricing from certain parts of the world where I believe there is a lot of government subsidy. A little tough to compete against that, but in general, yes, I would say we are.
Right. Okay, over to Flavio. Flavio, the new Canada-US-Mexico agreement is supposed to be very beneficial to North America manufacturing. Do you think it is for Canada? And is Canada going to be an active participant here?
Well, you know what? Like Diane, I started in 1976, but that was breathing. And so my perspective on this is that, I'll just use the last couple of decades and where we went on trade agreements. And Diane talked about the playing field. You know, in 2008, I was at Queen's Park, and when the OEMs, the Detroit 3 put out their quarterly earnings in the third quarter, just did a quick calculation. What's cash they have on hand? What's the burn rate? Quickly realized that Chrysler had 5 months, General Motors had 9 months, and Ford maybe had 21. And we started in Ontario to do this restructuring plan that eventually brought in the U.S. Treasury, and most of the money came from the U.S. But we decided as a jurisdiction to get involved in holding on to as tightly as we can the automotive sector, starting from the OEM cluster and then trickling on down to the suppliers. Why? Because it's important, as Jason has said, it's a manufacturing anchor. It's an industrial anchor that helps to bring in other prosperity. Now, what have we done on trade the last 10 years since that? Both governments, this one and the previous one, walked us into the TPP, that at the central premise, the central Canadian concession was less local content in automotive. What that means is less business for less requirement to buy from Diane to make cars to sell to Americans. The whole premise of the Canadian automotive sector for the last 110 years has been, we're the best place to make cars to sell to Americans. 75% of what we make gets sold to Americans. So we watched since 1992 to 1994, from the Maastricht Treaty in the EU to the new NAFTA, we watched a real trend for 25 years of globalization. The new CUSMA, the USMCA, I think doesn't just reset that relationship between automotive and Canada, US, and Mexico, but I think it'll be that point in time where we look back over the next 5 to 25 years. When did we stop with the globalization bias and go with the localization bias? I call it a bias because it's not binary. In the new USMCA, the CUSMA, if you want to sell a car to an American consumer, 75% of that car, instead of 62.5% of that car, has to come from, has to be sourced from any combination of the three countries. A part to be sold into that car to qualify has to, instead of 60% of that part, 65 to 75% of that part. On the core parts, if they're made of steel or aluminum, you need to source 70% of that locally. Oh, are you making it in a facility that pays less than $16 an hour? And that's the wage. That's not all in. Then you need to find 40% of the components, that local content, from parts suppliers that pay $16 US an hour or more. All of those dynamics. And by the way, the 62.5% versus the 75%, well, the current NAFTA 62.5% is based on 29 parts categories. The new USMCA is based on twice that. Every single measure and point of the new USMCA's rules of origin for automotive reverses the trend of where we were going on TPP. We think our analysis is that for the Canadian part suppliers, and I'll include the entire spectrum there, everything from tooling to volume parts to software systems, there's an incremental amount of about $6 to $8 billion a year on top of annual shipments of about $35 billion a year today. I can't wait for full transition. It is akin to adding 2.5 new greenfield OEMs in Canada. So yes, Peter, that's a long way of saying, yeah, we're going to benefit.
Well, certainly an exciting time, I think, for Canada. If we can participate to the extent the new trade agreement allows us to, it's going to be a great opportunity for manufacturers. It's going to be a great opportunity for new business as we, participate in that all-important North American content. Let me turn it over to Jason now, and I have a question. Given our COVID crisis, as I refer to it, advanced manufacturing is, seems to be a critical component, not the only component, but a critical component to survival in light of the potential changes to international trade and the supply chain as we know it. And due to, partisan feelings around reshoring, particularly goods deemed to be critical, such as pharmaceuticals. Can this be accomplished? There's a lot of talk about reshoring. There's a lot of talk about products being remanufactured back here in North America or in Canada, as the case may be. I suspect the answer here is near term it's difficult, but what's your perspective on it?
I think in many ways the COVID crisis has aggravated some of the challenges that manufacturers, not only in Canada but around the world, are facing. It certainly caused a lot of headaches, a lot of new risk in terms of the resiliency of supply chains around the world. I totally agree with Flavio. I think there are tremendous opportunities now for nearshoring, for actually building up production within Canadian manufacturing, and that's also very evident when it comes to the development of healthcare products or PPE to fight COVID. It became very clear that we have not produced these products. And now I think it's a lot of people are thinking how important that is, and clearly we've seen the ability of manufacturers across Canada to pivot to produce many of these products here. And advanced manufacturing systems, technologies have been critical here, and they've allowed companies greater flexibility, greater ability to respond quickly to changing customer demand. They've provided an opportunity for companies to change product lines, to develop new products, and to integrate new technologies in products. So that's all very good. They've also helped companies, the application of digital technologies, helping companies to trace their supply chains, to improve their existing processes, and that's important as well. But I think one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing right now is the cash flow crunch. In many sectors, demand has fallen pretty dramatically. Will continue. I think the full impact of the downturn in customer demand in some sectors is just being felt now.
Isn't it fair to say, Jason, that the labor advantage that's been so evident when manufacturers look to jurisdictions of low labor costs, they tend to move their manufacturing facilities there. All you have to do is witness the success of China in the last decade. But isn't advanced manufacturing the key component to try to make that manufacturing margin effective without heavy or significant reliance just on labor inputs?
Yeah, absolutely. Here, I think it's very clear that Canada is a high cost jurisdiction to manufacture. So what advanced technologies enable manufacturers to do is to improve their processes, reduce the cost of production, but more than that, find new ways of providing value to customers. And right. That, above all, I think is very important. What we're seeing is, in many cases, it is not just a removal or a reshoring of manufacturing, but a nearshoring of the engineering, the advanced technology component of production, and also the high value, high margin, more complex production systems. That's where it really pays to produce locally. And again, this is something that we're seeing, I think, in the COVID crisis. I do want to flag, though, that this has to be managed well, and that cash is pretty important in terms of the ability of any company to continue to invest, not only in technology but in skills development, market development, and so forth. It's cash really dictates where manufacturing is going. And so the ability of companies today to navigate through the business challenges they're facing, take advantage of the market opportunities that are opening up, is really key. Just one final stat that we have as we were setting up our the Advanced Manufacturing Supercluster, took a look at the performance of Canadian manufacturers in terms of the investments that they've been making in technology. And what we found working with StatsCan, 6,000 manufacturers in the survey, 80% of those manufacturers had made some investment in advanced technologies over the previous 3 years. But over half of the companies that had made those investments had not achieved their business objective. Now, either that is because the technologies were inappropriate, or perhaps didn't get to the point of improving the process that they had intended to improve, or maybe they didn't have the business requirements, the processes, or the skills required to manage the technology effectively. And so that's why I'm coming back to the point that technology is important, but it's the way that the technology is managed to deliver the business results that are even more important. And that's where I think this combination of the ability to provide customers with new solutions on one hand, but the ability to do that well in a way that continually improves processes, that continually that manages risk well, and that is able to at the same time do this in as efficient a way as possible is really key. So part of that is a technology issue. Large part of it is a manufacturing management issue.
Yeah, well, if there was ever a time to manage manufacturing and improve efficiencies, this is it. There's no doubt that, suspension of economic activity for many companies has caused cash flow problems. No doubt many are in discussion with their banks. I have found generally the Canadian banks to be very accommodating, and I hope that condition continues. But at some point, there's going to have to be measures taken by all companies, to make sure they can utilize their cash in the best way possible or conserve it to the maximum extent they can. So now that we're on the subject of that, Diane, your company's been on the front lines of this, so to speak, and I understand that you did not really suspend operations. How'd you manage that from a safety perspective, and how about cash flow and business volume? How have you dealt with those problems?
Yeah, well, I guess we had a number of customers who said, you're essential for us in terms of being in the supply chain. So that was our motivation to remain open.
Pretty good customers.
Yeah. I love them every day. But we definitely had to take some, sort of drastic action, you might say, from simple things like really locking our doors to visitors, creating, intensive screening policies, even internally with respect to our employees. With our automation division, we had a lot of guys who were out on installation, around that time period, helping put equipment in place. And we basically paid for them to stay home and self-isolate for a couple of weeks afterwards, just to make sure that they wouldn't impact the rest of the workforce. Did the intensive cleaning, trying to think of other things that we did. We have, in one way, the safety was paramount, of course. So it was like, if we can't do this safely, we're not going to do it. But we have the luxury of space in our facility. So we have these massive milling machines that we use to machine at Concord. We've got quite a bit of office space and spread for our accounting and our engineering staff. So we just spread people around, did some switching of lunch shifts and things like that for some of the common spaces, ramped up our cleaning of everything that people touched, and really asked everybody to pull together and protect each other. We wanted them to be safe, as a team. And I said, think of us as an extension of your family, right? You wouldn't want your family to be impacted by you coming to work, and nor do we want you to do things that are high risk and bring that into the workplace. Good reaction, though. Good reaction to your customers
And how have they been over this period? Have you been short on cash, or have they been generally timely with you?
Well, we learned some really rough lessons the last time around in 2007, 8, and our own kind of issues there. So we had a big objective to really strengthen that balance sheet. And, we're one of the fortunate companies in that we have a decent war chest, as they call it. And so cash has not been our biggest concern, but obviously in this kind of environment, you have to pay attention. So we've taken advantage of managing it in ways that we can. We haven't really seen any, knock on wood, problems from our customer base yet, but, we'll see.
Good. No, it's a good practice. My father always used to say, you always need to save for a rainy day because it always rains.
This is one big rain, isn't it?
This lasted longer than 30 days. Noah's Ark. So Flavio, how important is it for manufacturing to get moving in Canada? We've had various starts and stops. The provincial government seems to want to extend the state of emergency in Ontario, which is a key manufacturing province. It's obviously not the only province, and of course we have to respect, the health and safety of the population. But our consumers are our workers, and if they don't get to work, we're going to have some implications around that. What do you think is going to happen in the next 2 quarters? And can we get back to normal production in 2021?
Canadian automotive business, especially the output from Canadian plants, and to say nothing of the output in the US from Canadian-owned plants or the output in Mexico from Canadian-owned plants, it's kind of funny. We all serve the American customer. So when you ask this question, I think we're all looking for a Canadian answer. It is almost irrelevant in the grand scheme of things on what the Canadian consumer does, although the dynamics are the same. We need consumers not concerned about a W recovery, so they'll spend money. We spent some money last couple of weeks with a series of other business groups to consult the business community around the province and also public opinion. We asked them about what they thought. Did they have anxiety about their car payments or maintenance? The answer is no. There wasn't a difference between the pre-COVID era and now. Okay, during this period, when in most jurisdictions across North America, people to some degree have been sheltered in place or locked down or quarantined, are not using their vehicles. The most important dynamic for a Canadian automotive parts sector is what's happening in the U.S. Northeast, the U.S. Southwest, as target markets for a lot of the products that we produce and serve. What we're seeing there, and sure, there's lots of political debate, there's epidemiological debate, there's public policy debate, but a lot of those markets have reopened, and the consumers are acting, especially in the last couple of weeks, as if nothing happened. And so we see some modeling that's a little bit, you see IHS, who we really rely on, talk about a strong return, that an annualized, the annual production this year will be off about 35%, but that we're looking at in the middle of 2021, the kinds of volumes that we would have anticipated had the dip not happened. We see companies like AFS say, perhaps it might take us till 2023, 2024 to get there. The fact of the matter is that if you're looking for intel, you have to look at the American consumer and not the Canadian consumer. Now, in Canada, the only, the only stubborn market is the Ontario market. It appears that, we plateaued the curve and we're doing this right now. One of the dynamics I'm looking at in that data that helps to kind of predict the reopening is the percentage positive from tests looks like this. The hospitalization curve looks like this. We're testing more people, and we're testing different populations than we were a month ago. The data says a month ago we were testing long-term care where a lot of those cases were acute, and now we're testing differently. I think if we get a sustainable return, I think we all know that we're looking at some type of a second wave, but we're building workplaces and PPE to keep people safe within them. If we can get to 75% in the next couple of months, and I think that we are there, we're just a little bit anxious about it. We may see a curve in automotive production that, maybe there's a unprecedented dip during COVID, but we might come back to that line sooner than you think. Certainly, the car buyers in the U.S. Are showing us the way.
Yeah, I share your sentiment about car buyers. I think there is pent-up demand. I think people have postponed their purchases, but certainly not abandoned them. And I couldn't agree more that the U.S. market is important, not just to Canada. It's a huge consumer market with a diversity of tastes. There's a number of products that find their way to the U.S. market. And if the U.S. market does not recover, the world limps along with it. So I think you're spot on as to Canadian Resolve. I think, you look at, the work Diane's company has done. I think that's to be applauded. People have found a way to cope with the issues that arise from a pandemic like this. And I think it's a testament to how people can solve the problem and how we can do two things at once, as has been often said. So, I guess this is more of a question for all of you, but I mean, how do you think Canadian manufacturing has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic? Jason, how about you first? What's your perspective?
Well, fast across the board. I think showing the degree of flexibility and agility and problem solving and engineering that really are specialties of Canadian manufacturers, regardless of the sector. Here, late March, Next Generation Manufacturing Canada launched a $50 million program to fund the development, really the development of production for innovative products to fight COVID, looking at products that could be brought to frontline healthcare workers by the end of June. We had over 1,000 applications. Probably we were only able to fund about 25 different projects here, and we focused on projects that were high priority for governments here and for Health Canada and PHAC in particular, ventilators, test kits, therapeutic products, disinfecting agents and disinfecting equipment, all of that, and as well as other types of PPE. I guess the response was tremendous. I think that the types of projects that we funded are a really good example of what lies ahead for manufacturers in terms of these are innovative solutions. They're unique solutions being developed here and with potential commercial opportunity around the world. They all combine advanced technologies in either the product that is being developed or the process for manufacturing these products. And I think above all, they all have an ongoing sustainable business plan or a business opportunity. They're areas of production which are not just in short-term demand or will be in demand throughout the pandemic, but can really position Canada as in a leadership role with respect to these manufacturing capabilities. So I'm just totally impressed by the innovation and certainly impressed by the degree of commitment and motivation right across the industry.
Yeah, no, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Diane, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think, when you're motivated, you've got a, sister, stepdaughter who are nurses in Detroit, and they're right on the front lines, and they're telling you, my God, I'm so scared. I don't have a face shield. Other people that are freaking out around you. I mean, as a manufacturer, it's our obligation to step in and help. I mean, we started producing face shields very quickly using a 3D printer and getting supplies as quickly as we could. And I mean, we're not in the production business, right? We're making tooling, we're designing automation equipment to build that for other people. So it's a little bit outside of our normal wheel well, but you do what you got to do, right? And then we built a tool and we're producing these face masks. And we've had people, here, we've been giving them away, to be honest with you, because the certification of them as suitable for healthcare has taken quite a long time, if I could be honest. So we've been just gifting them to the community. But I mean, we've had people in tears at our door saying, thank you. Can I pay you for these? And we're like, no, just take them. Like we just have wanted to help. And so that's what we've done. But I remember a story about manufacturing when I was young. My father saying to me, I had come home from school, I was very excited. And I said, you know what I learned today, Dad? That societies go through this progression. They start as agrarian, where you're growing things, and then you have an industrial revolution and you're manufacturing things. And then the teacher said that then it becomes a service economy. And my father almost hit the roof. He said, my God, if that happens to Canada, this country will explode. He said, we cannot be without manufacturing. And I remember the emotional response that I got from him that day. But it's really now that I recognize what kind of dependence have we had all this time for all of this PPE. We've offshored all of these manufacturers to produce stuff that's critical to our survival and our safety. And we've made ourselves, in a sense, victims. So I think we have to figure out the way to make sure that all this work that's been done to get us up and running and to produce this stuff stays here. Because
you make an excellent point. I think what this is for me, what the pandemic brought to light was the innovation and the responsiveness that comes from modern manufacturing. I don't know how a modern society could say that its economy can advance without having the capabilities to make and invent and produce product effectively and innovatively, when you're faced with challenges like we have now. And I think you're spot on. Flavio, your thoughts on this?
You know what I've been doing for the last 2 months, Peter? I think answers this question. I worked in government. I worked at both levels of government. I've worked in the private sector. Deep respect for what both sides of that aisle can do. What government can't do is react quickly. But what it can do is bring to bear resources that are much bigger scale than the private sector. What this pandemic said to us, second week of March, I'm watching the news. I watch the EU say that they're going to put export restrictions on PPE. It's a real quick question. I had a conversation with some people that you all know, Giles Gerson down at Queen's Park, Vic Fideli, Nav Baines. We just said, okay, look, we don't make any of this stuff. And the very good and advanced Canadian medical technology sector makes this stuff, but they make hundreds of it or thousands. If we can't get it from our trading partners and we need tens of millions, what are we going to do? I offered to make a public call to action to auto manufacturers, because we build at a scale that is that has no equivalent. And like Diane's father said, God forbid we get to a place where we don't have manufacturing here. We put a call to action out on March the 15th. I immediately had 12 companies put their hands up, but we knew we needed more information. I went back to Giles and said, give me the list of what you need. I talked to ISED and said, tell me the list of what you need. Let's see if we can't work together to try to get specs. If we have to get specs, like Diane said, you got to make our own product. If you got to make your own face shield, Mitchell Plastics, you got to make your own face shield, and then you got to wait for certification, and then you got to wait for a public procurement. And we need it in a peak in April. We're going to have a problem. Use this one as a company, probably one of the top 4 auto suppliers in Canada. They've got plants all over the world. Woodbridge Group turned around and said, you know what? we're not going to wait for certification. We're not going to wait for money to come from programs. There's some great announcements after our call about money being made available, for example, from NGen. But we need to get to it quicker for public health reasons. We have a partner in Japan because Japan went through this before everybody else. Had already designed this and had already done certification and validation and certification in other jurisdictions. And the private sector, because it has a network around the world, was able to cut down from their partners, their Japanese partners in UAC, to cut down the development time. We worked with McMaster. There's a great story on McMaster where I went to go pick these up on a Saturday morning, a prototype in Vaughan, Ontario, drove it over to Hamilton, handed it off to the Associate Dean of Engineering, John Preston, who went into quick validation testing almost immediately. Within a week, the company had said, we can make it. Within 3 weeks, they were producing at volume, no purchase order, no money to help the tooling. The promise that money was going to come because the government can't move fast enough, but when it does, it can bring the stuff to bear. The private sector carried the can for the public sector on this piece, and we worked together. 165 companies said, they put up their hand and said, we'll do the due diligence. 77 after having done the due diligence, like Diane said, fine, we can do it. And 25 of them ended up in public procurement volume. We've got 40 million of these and 30 million of these ordered. There's a dignity in making things that we forgot. And just like when you go to war and you don't go to war with your button-up shirt on and say, hey, I got you. You go in with your equipment on. You don't go
harsh language doesn't work.
Well, it depends who you're fighting. But when you're going against an invisible enemy, if you don't put stuff between you and the disease, you're not going to make it.
Categorically.
And the legacy of the COVID era for Canadian automotive manufacturing and manufacturing writ large is.
Yeah. Well, Flavio, we've talked a lot about like reshoring and the difficulties related to that. And there are some big headwinds gaining strength, in my view. I mean, we've had, they're going to have a very significant influence on how North American manufacturing takes shape. If some of the trade sanctions being talked about take hold, and who knows whether they will, this is all a lot of political rhetoric by now, but I do feel there's some headwinds behind them. What do you think Canadian manufacturing should prepare for? Do you think there's a likelihood that, forget about Canada, that North America or Western Europe, people are going to be rethinking these things? You and I both know that. Is there a possibility that we're gonna really see this? It's not as easy as it sounds. I know you've said that before.
Look, if you're making these, or take out containers for the food that you order, and you want to chase that, you want to chase the quickest dollar, the most impact for your dollar, you should. If you're making cars, there's going to be a very difficult, as we get down to the commoditized components, very difficult argument on reshoring those. The fact of the matter is that North American automotive production, Japanese and Western European automotive production need those low-cost jurisdictions to make cost-competitive cars. And if any one of those,
not just us, yeah.
But the thing about Canada, and we've been saying it, and we pay lip service to it, and certainly, I did 2 stints in government. I was part of that, thought. But how do you execute? We want the most advanced manufacturing here. We talk about Industry 4.0. I know Jay and Diane, you probably hear that every day. What does it mean? It means that the Chinese who are making these have factories of the future making these. You think that there's armies of people making these cheaply. It's actually that Foxconn knows how to make this cheaper than our friends in Waterloo. And so if we're going to take advantage of some of the trade wins that you're talking about, we've got to demonstrate an ability to have the most advanced factories. It's really a factory of the future argument. Digitization, right. Industry 4.0, artificial intelligence, connected supply chains. Why? We're still making the same things, but we want to make them in cycle times that matter, at competitive advantages that we want the manufacturing assembly equipment to learn. We want to be able to connect our factories to our customers and to our subcomponent suppliers and our material suppliers in a way that is revolutionary, in a way that, I spent some time with Porsche. Peter, I invited you to that. You never came. But we went to see a factory where they make, where they're making their SUVs and where they're making Taycan. And we ended up out on the test track. And the highlight for me, I took that trip because I wanted to get on a test track in a bunch of Porsches. But what I came back with was, they really, really, really put a lot of thought into how the Porsche is made, not the engineering and the design of it. The actual factory itself is where the milk gets in the coconut. And if our government programs can't move fast enough to deploy that money, in this interim here, the Chinese will find another way to subsidize their production of their state-owned enterprises. And yeah, fine, tariffs, who cares? We may have a new president in 6 months in the U.S. and a lot of these trade wars may go.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think one of the viewers has asked, and maybe Jason will direct this to you, like if we're relying on input product the way Flavio describes it as being done overseas or jurisdictions that are either more efficient or better at it. I mean, can we really implement, the kind of advanced manufacturing 4.0 now that makes this economic for Canadian manufacturers? I mean, I think Diane has proved it. There's a lot of Canadian companies that have proved it, but I guess what does the future hold? And really, right now, is advanced manufacturing too expensive to implement? I guess your response might be it's too expensive not to implement.
Yeah, exactly. The one thing about technological change is it's not only been able to deliver new technologies and potentially new solutions, but it's really driven down the cost of a lot of technology as well. So the cost of entry, the cost of investment is much lower today than it was before. But I agree with Flavio. I don't think we should be expecting a reshoring of commodity-based products back to Canada.
No, we don't want it. Yeah.
But what I've seen as well, and this isn't just about existing manufacturing, this is also about the ability to scale up some of the technologies that the devices that the Canadian companies are so good at developing, and then maybe need a sensor. Well, we'll go to Taiwan because that's where they do sensors. And then they go to Foxconn and they find out that nobody really wants to pay attention to a small company. And so the next thing they do is they send an engineer over. And then the next thing they do is they decide that because of the engineering and the components are there, that's where they'll do the manufacturing. Then the IP moves. And that's all too common. One of the, we also often laugh, our unofficial motto is who knew? We have so many great technology, research, and manufacturing capabilities in this country. And I guess one of the benefits of the response to the pandemic is there's a much greater awareness now, as Flavio again was talking about some of the tremendous resources that we have here, companies like Diane's, that many manufacturers may not have been aware of before, but now there's a lot more awareness, a lot more collaboration. I think that's also extremely important. Totally agree about we need factories of the future. We need products of the future that can integrate technology and serve as platforms for service as well as just getting products out the door. This is all about providing new solutions going forward. But I think to the point of the question, we probably can't. If companies want to remain in business, I don't think they can stand back and avoid investing and trying to get the best out of their technology. But before doing that, it's all about identifying where you can provide that value to your customer, to your customer's customer. What is the solution based on the capability that you have, and then looking at doing that in the most efficient, the best way possible to incorporate the tremendous technological capability that is out there. AI, just quickly, AI is a good example. Got carried away with talking about AI and machine learning. All sounds really good. When it really comes down to it, AI is a system of prediction. And if companies can look at where in a process does a system of prediction give the biggest bang for the buck, the biggest return, that's the type of management thinking that I think companies need, rather than just simply focusing on the technology itself.
Yeah. Well, look, I was asked a question once about manufacturing in Canada and automotive manufacturing in the province of Ontario, and is it really economic? And my response was, if they can build cars in Germany, we can certainly build them in Ontario. And I think history bears out that if you constantly look for manufacturing advantage in labor, that it's fleeting, whether it's in the United States or even in the United Kingdom at the turn of the century, wherever you go, that's not the answer. The answer is to build things technologically at an advanced stage, in an advanced way, that will really help, bring products of an innovative nature to the forefront. And I think that's the critical component.
I think it is. And, when we look at Canada's been a great exporter of natural resources. Our natural resources of the 21st century is people and IP. It's knowledge and the people, the skill sets that we are so good in developing. Wouldn't it be, manufacturing is all about making things, but it's all about taking those skill sets, taking that IP and creating something, making something of value. here. And that's really, when it really comes down to it, that's the real importance of manufacturing. But it also speaks to the resilience, the agility, the solutions that Canadian companies can bring to the market far faster than some of the larger companies that we're competing with.
I agree. Being conscious of time here, we've got about 5 minutes left according to my time. Diane, over to you. How would you position your company and maybe others like it in terms of the current landscape? Are you ready to take up the challenge if reshoring really becomes a reality? And what do you think the advantages are of North American manufacturing, North American mold making, you name it? And you know, as another listener has posed a question, I mean, how do we use our student knowledge, the great capabilities that we have coming out of university? Can they play a role in helping us, come to this challenge? And
I mean, we're ready. I think that describes most manufacturers in this country. We've been doing it for a long time. We are looking at new technologies. I mean, our automation division, for example, some of the stuff that they concept and come up with is truly amazing. You know, as Jay mentioned, the IP that we have in this country is incredible. I think, you know, a little bit we have an issue with marketing. I'm going to say that. We don't necessarily, toot our own horns as well as we should. We don't know about each other. I mean, honestly, I had a customer with a production facilities all across North America. And I said to him, how's it going? You getting ready to reopen? And he said, yeah. He said, well, I don't know how we're going to take the temperature of all these people when they're going in. I said, hey, great. I know this local company here who's developed this device that your people can just walk through and it records all the data and tells sort of what their baseline. I mean, it's amazing. So I connected them, which is great. But I mean, had we not had that conversation, he would have never heard about them. And so it's that, how do we get more visibility about who we are and what we can do? And, I hate to say this, but if the biggest market is across the border, that's where we need the visibility, right?
It's almost like we have an understated importance about it. Like we're really conservative about our own capabilities in manufacturing. There's always been a lot of talk, as you said, earlier in this program, the service economy prevails. And I don't subscribe to that. Number two, I think we underplay our manufacturing capability and our know-how in Canada.
Oh, for sure. I mean, we have customers that say to us, your equipment, it just runs, you put it in, we don't have to worry about it. And then this other stuff that we've imported, our guys are working around the clock, to try and help our customers out of a crisis because they can't deliver product.
Right.
Not equipment or not tooling that we've built, but we're working around the clock to try and help them because that's what.
But Diane, doesn't that highlight the point everybody's been talking about through this pandemic? I mean, aren't you articulating it for everyone in that reliability of the supply chain, reliability of the product, being able to go back in an instant of time to make sure something works or to make a modification is crucial. And when you add up all the dollars and all the costs that go into bringing a product to market, that's a critical one, is bringing it to the market on a timely basis, on an effective basis, on a quality survivability basis, durability basis. All these things go into the equation. It's not just about dollar cost.
Yeah, there's so much waste, right? That people just want to look the other way and say, okay, well, here's the base price, but what about? There's so much afterwards that can impact their profitability that they need to look at in their sourcing decisions, And what do they say? You never know what you've missed until it's gone, right? I mean, imagine if they didn't have us as a supply base to bail them out of some of these crises. Sometimes,
it's brought it all. It's brought it all to the forefront. Well, again, conscious of time, I think we've come to the end of our broadcast here. As I look down, I don't know if anyone else has anything to add. I guess. Maybe a last question, if we have a minute. Flavio, if you could get government support for something, what do you think it would be right now?
Very simple. Modernization for the means of production. Companies like Diane's that make reliable goods that help companies like the ones that I represent make volume parts if government is going to invest in something, if we're going to have all these opportunities from the new CUSMA, from reshoring and those types of trends, let's make sure that the factories that we have make more reliable units per unit at a time than anybody else on the planet. If we do that, we've got the people, we've got the public policy framework, and we've got the can-do attitude.
Yep. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think that's right on. Well, okay, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us. I hope you all found that informative, and it was a pleasure to be your host today. Thank you.
Thanks, Peter, for leading this great discussion. It's been very insightful, inspiring, and to think about advanced manufacturing and its growing importance and recognition in Canada. I really appreciate it. Diane, Jason, Flavio, thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to my good friend, fellow Empire Club director, managing partner with BDC Advisory Services practice in Ontario, Sal Urbani, to offer proper appreciation.
Thank you very much, Mike. A great discussion and a lot to think about. On behalf of BDC and the Empire Club of Canada, it is my privilege to offer the appreciation remarks for today's virtual meeting. Diane, thank you for all that you do. You're a hallmark of excellence, national role model as a woman entrepreneur and leader in manufacturing. To Jason and Flavio, for your insights and invaluable work you do in the ecosystem, and to our moderator, Peter Hatches. Pete, thanks for bringing this together as always. Great job. And I appreciate your thought leadership. Indeed, this is an unprecedented time, and I know that many of our clients who are attending today's meeting, whom I've had the privilege to serve, I continue to be inspired by your resilience. I have a tremendous amount of respect and admiration for your work and determination. Lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't take pause to acknowledge how proud I am to be affiliated with an organization with a steadfast commitment to diversity and inclusion. At BDC, we stand with those who suffer racial inequality at home and abroad. Our unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion, in fact, is not new. It remains as firm as ever. Together, we must help amplify the voices of those who are not heard. And on that, Mike, back to you. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sal. Thanks, everybody. We at the Empire Club love hosting these events. There will be a few more yet before the season is done. Please check our website to find out about other ones coming up. To all our panelists, to Peter, thank you very much. This meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.